Welcome back to part 2 of the kids desk build. In part 1 we covered the desktop design and the base design. What you'll watch in this second part is me going through the second half of the build, adding the finishing touches. So let's get started. Now that I have the main body and base done, the fun begins. If you haven't seen part 1, go and check it out. I turn my attention to the drawers, fronts, lids, and handles. I called on the domino once again to assemble the drawer boxes. I decided to use walnut for the drawers as well, so the floating domino tendons hide all the joinery and keeps a nice clean drawer slide. I also decided to try the bloom drawer slides for this build. I was a bit intimidated by it, but I was able to install it without a jig and the calculations weren't too bad, as long as you work off the drawer width and your exact drawer side thicknesses. Oh, and did I mention, these bad boys are soft close. The mechanism is really smooth. I'm not going to go over the process, but I'll reference two videos that I thought did a good job in explaining how to calculate the critical side-to-side opening. One was the Crafted Workshop and the other is Sean Boyd's video. They give a clear explanation and I'll link the videos in the description. The key parts was notching out the bottom corners of the drawer and drilling a hole to register the drawer slide tab. Once the drawers were put together, I turned my attention to those small lids. Man, these gave me the biggest headache. It was definitely a lesson in planning out a build and figuring out all the hardware needed before assembly. I wanted to use concealed hinges but didn't plan ahead of time, so the cubbies were too tight to be able to mortise out the hole to attach the hinge. If you follow my Instagram @charitybuilds, you'd see the different interactions and discussions around this issue before settling in on what I call a Lamborghini or suicide doors. If you don't follow me already, please head over and follow my work behind the scenes. So using one hinge isn't ideal, but I think it's the best possible solution. If I had to do it again, I will plan out the cutouts and add the mortises prior to the board glue up. This will allow me to reveal the mortise once the cubbies are routed out. I installed the lids using the CA glue and painter's tape method. I also used pennies as spacers to set the fronts in. The pennies are approximately a 1/16 of an inch, so cutting the lids to fit snug and then taking off 1/8 of an inch gave me a nice 16 inch reveal all around. I then attached the drawer fronts using my right angle drill attachment because the drawers were too short for my drill. Man, that closing action never gets old. If you made it this far or have skipped to this point in the build, that means you're looking forward to the more fun part of the build. Shout out to all the kids at heart. To incorporate the crayons, I decided to make the small lids out of epoxy with floating crayon shapes. My boy loves construction sites, so we went with that theme for his side of the desk. And my daughter is the princess of the family, so we went with the Frozen theme for her side. To achieve these shapes, with the help of the kids, we picked out the colors they liked for all the individual pieces. Then I melted the crayons. Before the crayons fully hardened, I used the cutouts to cut the shapes in the crayons. I then moved on to the epoxy part of the build. Speaking of epoxy, I have to take a moment and send a special shout out to Total Boat. They were kind enough to send me the epoxy used in this build, and also include these cool gloves and a nice hat that you see me rocking in this video. I am not a big channel, nor do I have a big following, but that shows what they stand for as a company and how much they support the maker community. Thanks, Total Boat. Proceeds of my build go to charity to help underprivileged communities in my birth country, the Gambia, through an organization I founded 6 years ago. So any help I receive to keep overhead in the shop down means the more I get to pay forward. If you would like to support what I'm doing, please subscribe and help me get to those monetization thresholds. I hope to have some merch soon, so look out for that. Once I cut out all the crayons, I saw an opportunity to make small epoxy toys for the kids using the crayon voids as a mold. So I mixed up some epoxy. Suddenly another idea came to mind. I thought, what if I made epoxy knobs? I created a quick well on the back of the epoxy shapes and poured a standoff. I decided to add threaded inserts to give the knobs more bite and holding power for the screws. I did try to do it using threaded tabs, and it worked out, but I was worried about the long-term implications. With all the epoxy parts cured, I proceeded to wet sand all the epoxy pieces up to 4000 grit and polish using polishing compounds. Part of the inspiration of going this lavish on the kids' desk is to create something that will last as they get older and grow out of the playful elements. So I created duplicate wood lids and knobs so that the epoxy elements can be swapped out at a later date. Really, this desk is transitional in a sense. I can see it in a kid's space, but sure, it can be in someone's home office with a simple change of the knobs and lids. I tried something that was quite scary in turning the knobs on the table saw. Now I know people will frown upon this technique, but I tried to be as careful as possible by keeping the stock long and took small bites. In the end, it worked out and I didn't lose any fingers. I have to say, having a saw stop gave me some insurance as well. Now that all the parts to the puzzle have been built, it's time to sand and apply finish. A lot of sanding went into this build. I even had to hand sand all the edges to make sure that I didn't mistakenly run over any edges. I finished the build with Rubio Monocoat Pure. This was my first time using the product and it was a breeze to apply. Just wipe on and wipe off, and they say you can never wipe too much off. And yes, it's true, the smell is better than any finish that I've ever used. While you watch me put the finishing touches to the build, I want to leave you with a little something. If you ever find yourself in a position to do good, or something is asked of you, please consider it. I really hope you all have enjoyed the build. If you've enjoyed this project, please hit that like button, and please consider subscribing to follow my journey of building and paying it forward to those who are less fortunate. As the saying goes, charity builds lives. Or maybe it's my saying. Yeah.